Week 15 is just around the corner for NFL DFS, and it sets up as a pretty interesting slate with some viable value plays at running back, not terrible value wide receivers as well, and some fun games to stack. We're going to break down Week 15 in whole, talking about trends and injuries to know, game stacks, and our favorite plays at each position here today to get you ready for Sunday's main slate. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Thursday by Brandon Gdula. Check him out on Twitter at Gdula13. Find his work at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior managing editor. Brandon, Week 15 is coming in hot. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm great. You were singing some lovely renditions of the same song over and over and over again before we started the show, so that got me in a good mood. I hope that continues throughout the show.
Oh, I don't sing publicly. The fact that I was doing it in front of you is embarrassing to me, and we watched a Christmas movie last night, and a song that has a same word in it is now stuck in my head and has been stuck in my head ever since then. So it's not going to go away. I'll guarantee that.
What movie are we talking?
Hallmark from Tiffany's. Netflix. It's I think it's Amazon Prime Christmas movie. It's actually good. I enjoyed it. I mean, most Christmas movies are good, to be clear. This one though was enjoyable. So add it to the list. I assume you have Prime. No free ads, but
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Did we have an Amazon Prime read on the show earlier on this year? Yeah, we're fine. Yeah, we can. Yeah, it's not free anymore, but I can say that word at least.
Yeah, I mean. As well,
I know you're more of a Hallmark guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say should I not say Hallmark?
Yeah, I mean these are actually good, so I don't know if that kind of kills the vibe for you or not. But these are legitimately fine movies.
So Hallmark still has the reputation of being really, really bad, but the quality of them has creeped up and up and up to the point that they're very viable. They don't blow you away. There's a couple that are oh, this is good. There's a couple that are oh, this is really bad. But we used to laughing at them.
Yeah.
And
it's really when Nicolas Cage is in legitimately good movies, you're oh, I'm kind of sad about that.
Yeah. So I mean, credit to Hallmark for upping the quality. I know millions of people like them. I know how much money they make Hallmark. They're working, but yeah, you lose a little bit of the what is happening right now kind of stuff in these current day ones. But I know you're a Netflix and sort of Amazon Christmas movie guy.
I did scroll through some of the Hallmark ones. Apparently Field Yates's mom's dog is in one, so I might need to check that one out. They had a puppy and he tweeted about it. So I want to find that one because his dogs are incredibly cute. So for that reason, I might seek out that Hallmark one specifically. So if anyone knows what that one's called, I could go back through his Twitter and find it.
Well, you could just check the dog's IMDb page.
Oh yeah. Okay, cool. That's pretty helpful. Okay. Yeah. So I'll do that. And I think that Brandon, if you're looking for the what is happening factor, you can look at the Week 15 main slate because Zeke Elliott is actually potentially kind of a core play. Joe Flacco is relevant. There's no Odell on the main slate, but we could have gone full 2017 if Odell had been on the main slate with Zeke, Flacco, and Odell. Alas, it's still a pretty interesting slate because there are a lot of are we actually doing this kind of questions for Week 15? We'll break down those throughout the show for today to get you ready for Week 15, talk about what we're doing with Zeke and much more in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. The Daily ISO with Tom Vecchio goes up every weekday, breaking down NBA DFS. Austin Swain has your UFC DFS needs covered as well. And of course, the Daily ISO Heat Check and Covering the Spread are also available on FanDuel TV Plus. To get FanDuel TV Plus, go to FanDuel.com/watch and log in with your FanDuel account, or go to the FanDuel TV Plus app on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Roku devices. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There is a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager. Only $5 pregame money line wager required. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789 7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's dig in now to this Week 15 main slate. And Brandon, to me, it's a couple of key questions we're asking ourselves. The first one to me is, what do we do with Zeke? He's $6,500. He had a huge workload with no Ramondre Stevenson last week. Facing the Chiefs is, decently heavy dogs, 8.5. That money line has tightened a bit, though, in that game, which I am intrigued by, / confused by. But anyway, that does help Zeke for sure. And then what do you do with the games with high totals in the slate? Do we load up on Bills, Cowboys? Do we go hard at Matthew Stafford in a very good matchup? Do we prioritize the 49ers as big favorites against the Cardinals? So it's a lot of key questions for me that will help define this slate. What are the things that stand out to you when you dig in to Week 15?
Yeah, other than what you really focused on, the one team that jumps out to me is the 49ers, just because they have you can almost put Purdy in this conversation, but guys who can really alter the slate. Like if Purdy is putting up 30, like 30 from Purdy, we'll get it done. I think he has that kind of upside. McCaffrey, of course, Debo and Ayuk. Ayuk's like target shares are still good. George Kittle obviously has that potential, but they're just 12.5 points is that spread.
It has tightened, and they have a lot of defensive injuries. So the concern for me with the 49ers is always blowout risk, where they're not getting guys involved late, but I think the blowout odds are decreasing slowly throughout the week, which is good.
Yeah, it's still elevated, but I think again, other than Zeke and the top games, I would say specifically the 49ers, making sure that we don't just kind of write them off or move past them or justify how easy it is to overlook them. It's moving into the other games. You can build lineups. You have with 6 teams in those games, maybe 5 if you don't include the team that's a 12.5 point underdog. You can build a lineup with just targeting those games, but where are you going other than that is, I think, the question that jumps out to me. I think we're probably both on the same page where we like the battle of the Bays with Green Bay, Tampa Bay, but then things fall off, and then you get into the question of, okay, it's late in the season, some guys are injured, there's going to be opportunities for teams, but their offensive expectations are low. How much does that matter? Are you going out of your way to target value plays on these teams with totals under 40 points? I'm not going to say that there's nobody there, of course, but figuring out that right balance of when to take advantage and when maybe to ignore it is something that we're going to have to ask ourselves throughout the week.
So let's start with that and transition now into our injury section. Talk about Zeke Elliott, because Ramondre Stevenson missed practice again on Wednesday. I think he's going to sit this week. We know that Zeke's role last week was very good. It was tremendous from an actual role perspective, where he played 90% of the snaps, had in that game 22 carries and 8 targets for 140 yards in scrimmage. Kind of fluky because he had a long reception that you don't project, but also a 75% red zone share with 3 out of 5 opportunities down there. So let's assume Ramondre Stevenson sits again. The role for Zeke is great, but they have the lowest implied total on the slate of 14.3, despite the fact that spread shortened by a point overnight. So How are you handling Zeke here with a low salary at $6,500?
Yeah, I think that you can't really ignore someone, and he played 91% of the snaps if we round up, so it's even better. But someone coming off of an 8-target game, I know he had the long catch, but his underlying data is still really good. Tons of routes as well, not just like just happened to get targeted at a really high rate on his handful of routes. He had 25 routes. You love to see that. And look, this team is, their future is uncertain, I'll say, with the coaching situation. So maybe we see a little bit like pulling out all the stops, just kind of doing some stuff, and maybe they just kind of make some things happen. It's really hard to sit here and say Elliott, coming off of a 91% snap rate at 6,500, shouldn't be played heavily because of the implied team total.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think that implied team total, the realistic probability that they just only score once or twice, although this could easily come from him, makes it hard to say is a true like 100% core play. Correct. So I can see the case for both. If someone says, hey, I'm playing Zeke in every lineup, or I'm not touching Zeke because everyone's going to play him and they're not going to score, I could see both sides. He's really, really polarizing in a sense.
For sure. Yeah, and I think the reassuring thing for me with Zeke, as someone I do want to be overweight on, not 100%, like he's no redacted like we had the past 2 weeks. Thankfully, he's on the Saturday slate, so that's a delight. He's not in that range because the implied total. I think the one thing that's reassuring, though, is the game that Stevenson left early. Zeke had 92 yards in that game. He had 88 2 games before that as well. So it's not as if like the yardage has come out of nowhere. So I think that's why I'm okay with going here. Do I love the fact that I'm going to be heavy on Zeke? No. Am I going to do it anyway? Yeah. I think that to me, there are 4 core running backs this week in Rachaad White, Zeke Elliott, Christian McCaffrey, and Tony Pollard. So he's firmly in that 4 for me, and a guy I'm comfortable going to, despite very much known downsides of his profile and his team's profile.
Yeah. As I sit here, I always talk about like a main lineup. I think Zeke's very much in the conversation for that main lineup.
I think he's very likely to be in it for me.
I think he is, but I can easily just get to Rachaad White as well.
Sure.
So, but that includes if I'm playing Christian McCaffrey, which then salary gets hard.
Right now is McCaffrey to be in that main lineup, which is part of why I want to use Zeke for sure.
Yeah, then that ups the probability for me to get to Zeke too. So yeah, we're on the same page.
Let's talk about the other side of that game quick. Isaiah Pacheco missed another practice Wednesday for the Chiefs. Sounds like there's still a shot that he plays. They're going to evaluate him throughout the week, but most likely he sits. We saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon have the roles we expected last week without Pacheco. Are you on either of them this week against the Patriots? CEH's salary, I believe, is $61, and McKinnon is $5,500.
They pretty much just split everything down the middle. Of course, it wasn't exactly the case, but yeah, CEH 61, McKinnon 55. Both had good receiving roles, but right in that 45 to 50% snap rate. Split 2 red zone carries between them. CEH actually 2 fewer routes, but 1 more target. I think that the probability with a workload like that someone's going to torch us just goes so low that I think you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, I think Rashee Rice is the guy you go to if you want a value play in the Chiefs. $6,500 for him. So I'm going to go there. I'm not touching those 2, and that's fine by me. If Pacheco were to play, even then I'd probably be a bit cautious because shoulder injuries are concerning for me with backs. So I think the Chiefs backfield one to avoid this week, but I'd be okay, very okay with Rashee Rice. Tyreek Hill missed practice Wednesday with an ankle injury that he suffered on Monday. Should be able to go after he returned to that game, but he's definitely not 100% right now. Devon Achane also missed practice with a toe injury. We'll talk about the Dolphins in the trend section. CJ Stroud and Nico Collins both missed practice Wednesday, and they seem likely to sit this week. They're facing the Titans, so it's a good matchup, but they're missing their 3 best offensive pieces now, with Tank Dell also out. Dalton Schultz looks like he'll be back. Noah Brown has played well this year, but I'm avoiding everybody here with Davis Mills starting. What about you?
It's kind of wild that this team has better offensive expectations given their circumstances than the Patriots do.
Yeah, why is that? I don't agree with that personally. That's weird.
I mean, you would know because you model things out from that perspective,
I
but
took the over in Chiefs Patriots, and I bet the Titans against the Texans. But yeah. Well,
I
it's
don't
because the
think that.
Titans defense sucks. I think that's actually why. I thought about it for a second. That's why.
Yeah, I don't see myself going here at all.
Yeah, I agree. Chris Olave dealing with an ankle injury and didn't practice Wednesday for the Saints. Bit concerning because there was like Dennis Allen specifically mentioned that he had an ankle injury, so that's concerning to me. Taysom Hill and Rashid Shaheed both at practice and seem on track to return this week, but Olave would be a pretty big loss here. So, how are you viewing the Saints at home against Tommy Cutlets and the Giants?
Well, I love Olave, so this is a tricky one. I've just basically been playing Olave. I've been overweight on him. It feels like week after week. These injury reports are for some teams are getting really, really hard to navigate, and it's hard to talk about things Thursday morning because we get the Wednesday practice. But where's Taysom Hill in terms of salary? He is 7,000. I don't know. We have some value tight ends who are definitely lively. Mm-hmm. That helps, especially if we're trying to prioritize Christian McCaffrey. We haven't gotten to like quarterbacks, but we got Josh Allen. I'd probably still be most likely to play Hill, but then I go back to that question. There's like no Olave. Did they lean on Alvin Kamara?
Essentially. I also think it ups Shaheed a bit. His salary is 6,000. It's indoors. It's not the best game environment by any means. I prefer guys like him in better game environments, but he's a very talented player, earns downfield targets. Derek Carr has been more efficient than perception this year because, like, whenever we see him, he's getting yelled at by his teammates, which is bad vibes.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think Shaheed is out of play at 6,000. Would he be someone I would like adore necessarily? No, but like, I'd be receptive to him if there's no Olave.
Receptive for sure. I think someone like Shaheed, again, he would need to be full in practice by Friday, of course. I was kind of coming into this one where it was too much of a coin flip to know if he would play, but I think Shaheed's someone who, as much as I like him as a talent, probably benefits a lot from having Olave draw attention away. So he might get volume, but it might not be as efficient as we like.
True.
Again, I think he's good, but I don't know if he's number one receiver good.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, it's the Giants, but so I'm with you. He'd be in that consideration set in low 6,000 range. I might prefer if Olave plays, but I still don't like this game enough. Like if Olave plays, do you want the Saints? Like, do you like the Saints guys enough?
Not really. No.
Yeah.
Which is a bummer. But yeah, not really there. Brian Robinson didn't practice Wednesday with the hamstring injury he suffered before their bye week. That puts his availability in pretty serious doubt as they face the Rams, which could make Antonio Gibson viable. We'll talk about them in the bookmakers section. DJ Moore didn't practice Wednesday with an ankle injury. Didn't really notice anything with him on Sunday, so I think he'll be good to go, but worth monitoring. They get the Browns on Sunday. Any interest in Justin Fields or DJ Moore, assuming that Moore does play?
I think Moore did get like rolled up and left for a bit.
You're right. He did on the side. You're right. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So again, I'm definitely not trying to defer, but I feel like late in the season, especially, we just get to the point where we don't know. DJ Moore's been a lot better than I expected. He was someone who I felt was a little too highly ranked in like season long leagues coming into the year. I was like, they're not going to throw enough, but he's been the guy. It's 7,900 this week.
I think he's great when you're stacking Fields, but I don't foresee myself using Fields against the Browns defense.
Yeah. Although the Browns are kind of interesting for like bringing it back. Yeah. So I could see the case for it from a differentiation standpoint, but if you just sort of look at Moore in a vacuum, there are at least all right, let's go Debo,
Puka Nacua, Mike Evans,
Puka.
Debo's right there if you want to include him. It's a little bit further up, but
yeah, I did. Like
I like Ayuk more, honestly.
Yeah, I said him too.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So
I think Ayuk's pretty sneaky. Not sneaky because it's like almost 8,000, but just feels like he hasn't erupted lately. But
yeah.
would you rather play DJ Moore at 79 or like a fully healthy Chris Olave at 75?
Similar game environments. Olave's indoors, I guess. So probably
little
Olave for the salary savings.
I think so too. I love Chris Olave, so that's part of it. I love DJ Moore though too. I loved him coming out, but yeah, I'm probably not gonna get the DJ Moore this week, even if he's good to go.
I need DJ Moore for Dynasty facing JJ Zacharyson in our Dynasty League. I think, did you get a bye in that league or?
I don't know.
You're in the playoffs. Look at your lineup. My gosh. Dalton Kincaid, limited in practice Wednesday with shoulder and thumb injuries. Shoulder was the bigger concern, but it does seem like he'll be good to go. We'll talk about them in the bookmakers section. Jerome Ford, able to get into limited practice Wednesday. He got banged up on Sunday. He has a wrist injury. Kareem Hunt missed practice Wednesday, but he never practices Wednesday because he's old. So that's fine. We'll talk about them in the trend section. Aaron Jones returned to a limited practice on Wednesday. He has missed 3 games with a knee injury, did get in 3 limited sessions last week before sitting out. Christian Watson remained sidelined. A.J. Dillon didn't practice with a thumb injury, and Vita Vea also missed practice for the Bucs with a toe injury. So interest in that backfield, I will say for sure, but you'll talk about the Packers in the trend section. Finally, Tutu Atwell did not practice Wednesday with a concussion. Tyler Higbee did return to a limited session with his injured neck. Demarcus Robinson popped up for a big game last week with Atwell out. We'll talk about them in the bookmaker section as well. Speaking of which, let's dive in now to our bookmaker games for week number 15, beginning with the tied for highest total in the slate now, which is in Buffalo for the Bills and the Cowboys. 50.5 right now is the total. Very slim favorites are the Bills at 1.5 points, and it checks the heat check boxes of high total, tight spread, but it is an outdoor game for the Cowboys. The Bills defense has at times played okay despite all their injuries. So how does this game rate out for you for stacking?
Very well. We have enough options where it doesn't feel too narrow, but it also doesn't feel like you don't know who would be the names. I think the hardest part for me is where I am with Dak Prescott. I like Dak a lot. He's got a path to upside for sure. I'm gonna have a hard time building lineups with Dak over Josh Allen. So this might end up being a week where I kind of duplicate a lineup because I'll have stacks from, I'll have receivers or running backs from, both sides here, and I could easily justify just pivoting from a Josh Allen at quarterback to Dak at quarterback with the absolute same lineup. I know I'd lose 400 in salary there, but I don't want to guess wrong and have Dak sort of be the one who has the bigger game. But, he's had what, like 2 30-point games in his past 5. He's got like passing upside. He's got some rushing upside as well, especially in a big game. I think Dallas could make a statement here. So where are you with Dak relative to Allen, but more specifically relative to the rest of the quarterback slate?
Yeah, lower on him than Allen because I like Allen a lot. And I always worry with outdoor quarterbacks or indoor quarterbacks going on the road. I think the big point in Dak's favor is this game here against Philadelphia. That was outdoors, huge game against a pretty bad defense, but 373 and 3 touchdowns in that game, 28.36 FanDuel points, and they played legitimately awesome in that game, just didn't win. So,
and was like a shoelace away from a rushing touchdown.
Correct.
Too, right? Yeah.
Correct. He only has 1 rushing touchdown recently. So and he's been running a lot inside the red zone, I believe. Dak, when he was like Dak Prime, I guess he's Dak Prime now, but like when he was like previously at his previous peak, he was running a lot inside the red zone, and that was huge for him for fantasy because he'd stumble into a lot more rushing touchdowns. This year, he has 11 red zone rush attempts. He actually has 4 the past 2 games. So I think that's encouraging.
Yeah.
I think the problem I have is if I'm not getting Josh Allen, I'd probably want to spend down for Stafford at 72 to get to McCaffrey. So Dak to me is quarterback 3 at best, but he might be quarterback 3. I don't think anybody else is up there. So yeah, he's quarterback 3 for me above Purdy. So like, I think for me, it's Allen 1. Well, it might be Stafford 1. It's one of those 2 1, and then teardrop down to Dak at 3, but then Dak might be in a tier of his own as well. So I'll get to him for sure.
Yeah, that's why I think he's so interesting. I could make a case where I don't end up even having a lot of Dak, or I could say he's the most obvious pivot in the world, with being in the game that we like, and everyone loves Josh Allen. But yeah, it sounds like we're mostly on the same page here. Recognize the upside with Dak. Biggest question is moving outdoors, but like you said, we've seen him play well. But what also helps is a value running back on the same team, I guess tight end as well.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts on the rest of the Cowboys?
So let's talk a Pollard first. His salary is $7,000. It was the second time this year where I've been doing the salary scroll on Monday, and like I've gasped when I saw Tony Pollard's salary. The first time didn't go well. You'll be shocked to hear that, but his role's been a lot better recently. Target totals have been 4 or higher in now 4 consecutive games. Rico Dowdle is getting some work towards the goal line, so Pollard's goal line role has gotten worse, but it's still like fine. So I like Pollard quite a bit at 7,000, and he is a firm core play for me. And I actually think that, like, if we're talking secondary plays in this game, as far as like game stacking, I think that James Cook is actually in play. As you know, I've been off James Cook pretty much the entire year because of his lack of red zone involvement. And like, that's still true. He's still not getting a lot of work towards the red zone. But since Joe Brady took over as OC, and this is probably just randomness, but like they've had 13 plays inside the 12-yard line, and Cook has been on the field for 9 of those, 9 out of 13. And he played the 1 goal line snap they played in that time. So like, I still think his red zone role is going to be bad, but like there is at least a path to it being better than it was before Joe Brady was the coordinator. So I'm pretty receptive to James Cook, whereas I have not been previously. He will not be in my core, but like a 20-30% kind of play from an exposure perspective. Is that dumb? And where are you on Pollard? Let's go Cook first, then Pollard.
Yeah. I was waiting for like, is that dumb and where are you on Cook? But yeah, he's a game stack only for me. If I think especially if I'm not playing Josh Allen, I wouldn't mind playing Allen with Cook, but I'm kind of assuming that Cook does have a red zone score or 2, and therefore Allen doesn't get those rushing touchdowns in that situation.
Yeah, no, that's you're right. You're right. Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah, because you said rushing touchdowns specifically, and that's what you want with Josh Allen. So you were right.
Yeah. I can see yeah. Again, it's like I would not consider playing Cook with Allen. I just think that if I'm playing Cook, it's probably with the assumption that he has the rushing touchdowns, and therefore,
Could you hear that? That was way across the apartment.
Yeah, I heard it. I never know if it's good or bad. We haven't ever like kept track of whether those are good or bad.
The Rosa barks, yeah.
So yeah, he's a game stacks only for me. I like him as a player.
Yeah,
there's something about these Bills running backs when they play alongside Josh Allen, where the red zone work is, hit or miss. 7,200 is reasonable for this game environment, but that's the best I can say for Cook.
Is 20 to 30% too high for you? Like, to me, that could be game stacks only because I'll have a lot of stacks of this game, but
it's like 1 out of 4 or 5 lineups. Yeah, I mean, I could see that.
Okay. What about Pollard? Is he a firm core play for you?
Yeah, running back to me overall doesn't do a lot.
I agree.
I love McCaffrey. There's still blowout potential. I love Kyren Williams. I don't think I need to force that in. I think he's sort of at his salary peak in a sense. Kamara's workload is great, but then you kind of get a lot of imperfect resumes in the 8,000 range. If I'm going to take an imperfect resume, may as well save some salary, plug it into a good game with Pollard, who looks kind of livelier too. Doesn't necessarily reflect in his like rushing yards over expectation per carry, but it seems like he's running hard still.
I agree.
So I like that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the passing game pieces. You mentioned Jake Ferguson. I think that he's like one of the better tight end plays in the slate. Salary $5,900. I also do not mind Dalton Kincaid at 56. Kincaid dealing with a shoulder and thumb injury right now, but like had 8 targets last week in Dawson Knox's first game back. Still played a good number of snaps. So I feel like both these tight ends are firm considerations. And I think that what I would do again is just if I'm using Dak or Josh Allen, just put either of the tight ends in there and just like let the tight end ride at the game stack. How do you feel about Ferguson and Kincaid this week?
So I'm just gonna spoil the fact that we have the same exact player loves to the player across all positions. I think this is a really obvious, at least for our process,
Yeah.
who are the best plays at salary and why. A lot of overlap. We've been podcasting together for a long time, but this slate in particular, again, there's like 3 great games, and then there's sort of some obvious opportunities, but Ferguson's part of that, and I think I've liked him a little bit more than you have. It's not that I've played him.
You
We
definitely
haven't-
have. I've upped my view of him because he's getting more like yardage upside via downfield targets. So yes.
Yeah, but we also haven't had a lot of Cowboys on the main slate, at least
True.
as memory serves. So we haven't considered Jake Ferguson a ton, but yeah, he's got over 20% target shares in each of the past 2 games. And we've also seen him be relevant sort of early on, and then things kind of dipped, but now things are back up. So could have been maybe one of those a little banged up, but maybe not enough to matter. But yeah, he's getting work. He's plugged into a one of the best games of the week, if not the obviously best game of the week, just depending on how you view some of the other games. But yeah, Ferguson 5,900 saves salary from some of the top guys, but also has a little bit of that juice that you want. So Ferguson for me, I can't sit here and say he's my absolute favorite play at tight end and that I'll plug him into my main lineup, but I would not feel bad. Yeah, because I'm probably gonna want to stack this game as much as I can.
Yeah. Okay. Wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb salary 92, Stephon Diggs 85. Then you get down to a lot of value plays in Brandon Cooks, Gabe Davis. I'm still not going Michael Gallup, so I'm not even gonna bring him up. So like, what are you doing with the receivers here? Because I think they're tougher for me to decide on than the tight ends are.
Yeah, I feel like this is not fair to Stephon Diggs necessarily, but I feel like I'm only ever playing him due to like FOMO, which is a little bit too dismissive. But when you compare him to CeeDee Lamb, there's like really no comparison. And there's a salary discrepancy. I understand that, but Diggs can just sort of be a little bit of a non-factor because they have other options, and then Josh Allen can just run in touchdowns, and it's good for the team, but not for Stephon Diggs. He's obviously coming off of back-to-back 11 target games with okay results in one and, obviously subpar results in the other. So I'm not ignoring the fact that he's coming off of like 2 double-digit target games and is clearly their wide receiver 1. With that said, though, if I'm paying up for a receiver, I'm probably just going to get to that guy CeeDee Lamb, and then run it back with Gabe Davis.
Yes. Oh man, you yelled at me on Slack so much yesterday about Gabe Davis. How are you doing this?
I needed a fight yesterday. What? Of course, I think Gabe Davis makes sense. I just like to start like instigate some stuff, and also point out that Davis. I know we ignore the floor on this show. Gabe Davis can get a little more scripted out than I'd like, but he was 68 last week.
Yeah,
his salary's down to 62. Once you get like below 65, no receivers are ever perfect. So Davis in this game environment makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I think that's the big part of it. Is like, I don't think that Gabe Davis is a phenomenal football player. In fact, I kind of don't have a super high opinion of him in that regard. So like, you can sometimes predict when he'll have a dud. Like against the Jets, why would you ever even think about him? Like, what are we doing here? Because they have good outside corners. The Cowboys like do as well, but like I think it's not as a spot where I would necessarily need to avoid him. And like you said, salary 62. If you look at, and this is cherry picking, so just chill out for a second. Can I mute you so you don't rebut this? But if you look at guys who have had the most games with 80 plus yards and a touchdown this year, number 1 is Tyreek Hill, who has done it 9 times, I think, which is stupid. And then there are a bunch of guys with 4, and that does include Gabe Davis. So like, upside is still there at 62. I prefer Jaden Reed by a mile. I prefer Rashee Rice by a good bit too. But like, if I'm stacking this game and I need a value piece within it, sure, I'll put Gabe Davis in there and I'll feel fine about it, even though I know 2 targets, 0 catches is within his range of outcomes because he's done it twice in the past month, basically.
Yeah. So when I point that out, Jim yells at me like it
No,
doesn't matter.
I point it doesn't matter because like we're looking like you're not putting him in a cash game lineup. Like I might have used him in cash against you in that Philly game actually, but like at this situation, you're not putting him in a cash game lineup. You want a guy who
Yes,
can erase mistakes elsewhere, and Gabe Davis can be that guy at times.
he
I will
can
say
be, but
what's there?
well, I was gonna say you already mentioned Jaden Reed. Like Jaden Reed's getting handoffs. He's like
Yeah.
their number one guy by
He's like 2020
comparison.
Curtis Samuel, which is like my favorite
He's
DFS
like your
play of all time.
the best player of all time. Yeah.
Yeah. So
What about
like
Brandon Cooks?
no. You
No,
have to sell me on him. Go ahead.
I don't think that I quite can.
Okay.
Aside from a game theory standpoint
Sure.
of he's on the field. His target shares are not great. His single game target shares are 12.8% last week, 10, 15.6, 10. Like he can spike and get a little bit more focused. I don't know if you saw anything individually with this matchup because you usually have a good read on uh, watching film and seeing who might be a little bit more focused on in certain
Yeah.
matchups. But if Cooks doesn't do it for you, in 6,300, we're getting into the Rashee Rice territory, Jaden Reed, like again, those two guys in particular. But I do think there's enough, at least internal logic here, where if someone's like, hey, I know everyone likes this game. I'm gonna play Dak with Brandon Cooks and Stephon Diggs. I'm like, that's a very easy way to be different.
Sure.
I think Cooks doesn't necessarily need to be in there. You can play Ferguson, but I'm not gonna like yell at anyone for trying to play Brandon Cooks here.
I just don't want to use Cooks on the road. Like I can
That's
use
fair.
Dak on the road, I can use Lamb on the road, but like once you get to a 12.6% target share, which is what he's at since their bye week, that's tougher for me. So I won't get. If I say that while acknowledging that Gabe Davis's target share is like 10% in the games with Dawson Knox. I had their most relevant sample as being week 7 and 14 because that's when Kincaid's role spiked and Knox is healthy, and then Knox is back and Gabe's target share is 9% in that time. So like, it is what it
I
is.
cannot wait for you to play Gabe Davis against me in our head to head, and he
I'm not.
scores like 3 times.
I'm not doing that. I'm using Jaden Reed against you. I'll
I feel
give
like
you
you've
a
okey doked me a
freeze.
couple times. Yeah, Jaden.
Things have
We have this.
changed, and it
We
was
have the
with
same.
like, it's with a different player. It's like a player I thought had no upside, not a player who I thought was like raw, unfiltered, pure octane upside, which is what Gabe Davis is. But no Cooks for me. Anything else for you in this game?
I think we covered it pretty well. I know we
Mhm.
spent a long time on this one, but this is the game to cover in the most detail this week.
I agree. So let's talk about the second game on the bookmaker slate, which is the 49ers at the Cardinals. Right now, the 49ers are 12.5 point favorites with a total here of 47.5. That puts their implied total up at 30, which is very, very high. It's an easy matchup here with the Cardinals, too. And it's indoors, but they also might not need to keep their foot on the gas for all 4 quarters. So can the Cardinals keep this close enough to give us the full 49ers experience, or do we not care? We should just use them regardless.
I think there's a little bit of a doesn't even matter anymore.
Yeah.
Someone's going to have a big game. That's just how this team operates. Debo's coming. He's got 18.9, 33.8, and 30.5 FanDuel points in his past 3 games. Lots of touchdowns, which is worth noting. Meanwhile, Brandon Ayuk, he'd scored in 4 straight, didn't score last week, but had 126 yards. I think it's very, very easy for people to look at those 2 receivers in particular. Go with Debo because he's just been at his peak right now, and deservedly so because he's very, very good and he gets creative touches. But both of those receivers, if this game were a little bit closer, I feel like I could buy into it a little bit more. So I'll follow this up with a question. I like these guys a lot. I think this is a really easy way to get different. Everyone's probably going to be on McCaffrey. I think people will be on Debo, but like Ayuk, George Kittle, these guys still make sense.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that, the spread's getting a little bit tighter. 49ers defense not 100%. What does your model say? What do you think about this game? Can it stay close or no?
Don't ask me about the spread. I don't
Okay.
want to talk about that.
Okay.
But I had the total at 53 in my model.
Okay.
So it likes it a lot.
Mhm.
Then on a lot of overs for the Niners this year. Like their pace is slow, and I think people might overweigh that a bit. It's in my model, but like I think it might get a bit more weight than it deserves. And like again, the defense is banged up, so I've got the spread around 2 touchdowns. So the fact that it moved to 12.5 was a bit annoying for me. That's why I didn't want to talk about it. But like it's because of the defensive injuries. I think with Ayuk, the pitch in favor of him, because I agree with you, is that like, okay, people are on Debo, but Ayuk has a lower salary. I think the most relevant sample for these guys is the games where Debo's been fully healthy and Ayuk has been fully healthy. So I'm omitting the middle part of the year where Debo is very clearly playing through an injury. So omitting that part. In those games, Debo is at 95.3 yards and scrimmage per game. That's an insane number for a wide receiver, and you love that. But Ayuk is still at 86.4 in that sample. And like this is the sample that's most generous to Debo. It's still not bad for Ayuk. So Debo's the better play because his red zone usage is about double Ayuk's when you count the carries, and because his yards from scrimmage is higher. But from a pivot perspective, Ayuk rules, and I think that he fits really well. Like I don't mind putting him in a McCaffrey lineup too, because like Brock Purdy's playing so efficiently right now that multiple of these guys can get there. Like earlier this year, it's like, blowout risk. Maybe one guy will get there, so I'll use one of them. But like here, it's like they're all getting there, even Kittle. So like I think that Ayuk makes a lot of sense. And I agree with you a lot that he's pretty fun this week for tournaments.
So I know we love McCaffrey. We probably don't need to spend a ton of time on him. We want to get him into our main lineup for very obvious reasons with his workload being what it is. Is Debo close to like core play? I know we're talking Ayuk from a pivot standpoint, but should we just keep playing Debo?
I think, yes, we should be on Debo. The problem I have is I'm going to be stacking Rams Commanders pretty aggressively, which is going to include Puka Nacua. And his salary is 8,000. I want to have lines where I get to Mike Evans as a game stack with Jaden Reed or with maybe someone in the backfield there or Tucker Kraft. So like I'm using a lot of receivers in the 8,000 range. I feel like I need to actively try to get Debo in there. And I'm worried about being too low on him. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Yeah.
It's just one of those, can we realistically feel good? So Puka and Debo play at 405. Let's say it's 435. Can we feel good in hindsight saying we played Puka Nacua over Debo Samuel? I feel like yes, but I also think that when I phrase it that way, I'm like, I should probably really think about Debo a little bit more in terms of like a main lineup situation.
I agree. I would also say I am less inclined to pair Debo and McCaffrey together. I did for the Philadelphia game. But because Debo can get those red zone rush attempts, it does take a bit more away from McCaffrey than Ayuk does. So I'm more willing to pair McCaffrey with Ayuk than McCaffrey with Samuel. Not opposed, not like fully off, but like more inclined to.
Kittle?
Yeah. Salary 68 is very reasonable with what he's doing right now. I think the main issue I'll run into is I'm going to be spending down a tight end a decent amount this week because I want to get to McCaffrey. And it's harder to do so if I'm not using Tucker Kraft at 47, using Jake Ferguson, guys like that. But like, if value opens up and I'm not using McCaffrey, then I think that Kittle makes a lot of sense. It's just not like I like to pair my tight ends with quarterbacks, and I'm probably not going to get to Purdy this week because of the spread. But so I'd like to get there. I just realistically, like, I'll build my core lineups and I have like the lower dollar FOMO lineups. And I think that he'll be more in the lower dollar FOMO range than anything else this week.
Yeah. I mean, we have Kelsey against the Patriots at 75. He's probably worth his own conversation somewhere, but Taysom Hill at 7,000. And then it's Kittle at 68 is the guys who, and I know Njoku just is coming off a huge game, but there's only 3 names that we can probably pinpoint. Like this dude's got like 20-point upside and can really change things at tight end. Kittle's got a lot of like 18-point games not that long ago. So I don't want to write him off, but I think I'm with you where it's going to be a little harder to prioritize, especially if we like McCaffrey. If we think we're going to get to Josh Allen in either primary or like immediate lineups. I know we'll talk Matthew Stafford here in a sec, but I want to get some Kittle.
Yeah.
He's really easy to overlook all the time for me because they have so many names.
I think we should have one 49er in every lineup. Like their path to failure is hard for me to identify.
I think that's logical too.
Yeah.
Because someone's gonna have a big game, and
Yeah.
even if even if Kittle doesn't have the big game, he's probably gonna have a game worth something, for example. So like, I think that's a good call.
For the Cardinals, I don't feel the need to force a bring back personally. McBride's salary is fine at 66, but it's the same thing with Kittle, where it's like, I'd rather spend down. I hate all their receivers. Michael Wilson probably back this week. His salary's 51. Like, I don't know. Maybe you could do that, but like, I think I'll just avoid the Cardinals altogether, despite the fact that the injuries for the Niners make this game more competitive. So I'm probably out. What about you?
Yeah, it's hard to look at a team that's going to have to throw if the game plays out the way it does and gloss over McBride he's got 89, 60, 43, 131, 22, and 95 yards in his past couple games. But I know San Francisco's not 100%, but they put the clamps on tight ends historically and this year. So I think I'd probably just move past it and not necessarily force a bring back, which I don't love doing, but that's what 2023 has done to me.
I agree. Okay, let's talk about our final game here and talk about the Commanders at the Rams, where the Rams are 6.5-point favorites, and the total is 50.5, which means that the Rams have the second highest total or implied total on the main slate at 28.5, trailing just the 49ers. I think we'll both be behind the Rams skill guys here in Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua. But will you get to Matthew Stafford and any bringbacks on the opposing side, or would you rather just not deal with the headache that is the Commanders?
Should we probably sell people on Stafford here, right?
Sure, do it.
Okay, so he's facing the 32nd ranked adjusted pass defense according to numberFire's metrics. Stafford's faced just one team worse than 23rd in numberFire's adjusted pass defense metrics. That was twice against the Cardinals. In those games, he averages 227 and a half yards, but 2.5 touchdowns for 0.31 passing net expected points per dropback. League average is like 0.07 right now. So it's like wildly efficient. 55% passing success rate, which doesn't really happen a lot over like larger samples. And he's averaging 8 yards per attempt in that span. And if you look, if you kind of narrow things down, whenever he's played with Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, and Kyren Williams, he has 5 games there. 2.6 passing touchdowns, 250 yards, but 2 of those were actually against top 2 adjusted pass defenses. I don't want to make this like the sample super narrow, but he's getting it done with these guys healthy. As you just sort of pointed out, like, or asked on Slack, like, are the Rams just a good offense? And I think they're kind of just a good offense.
Yeah.
And the best selling point on Stafford, and look, we don't play a lot of low salary quarterbacks. We don't play a lot of pocket passers because they don't have a ton of upside. This week, though, we have Josh Allen, who can burn us. I think Dak can burn us. Purdy can still burn us. Mahomes hasn't really burned anyone this year. It's not the right matchup necessarily for him to flamethrower the slate. I think this is like a good case for Stafford, and that extra salary this week can go a long way because we got one specific running back at least, and receivers at the top are really intriguing.
Is it enough where you would put Stafford in your main lineup, or do you want to get to Allen there?
I don't know what Stafford's path to a complete dud is, other than throwing for like 250 and then Kyren Williams runs all the touchdowns in.
Yeah, that's probably it.
And that's it. But this is the best pass defense matchup possible. He's been good against tough defenses. I mean, look, touchdowns are fluky. But he had 3 touchdowns in each game against Baltimore and Cleveland the past 2 weeks. The top 2 adjusted pass defenses in football. I don't know if we're going to get a better sub $7,500 quarterback play the rest of the year.
Doubt it.
So
I agree. I think he's like a real likely to be in my main lineup for this week. I think that honestly, seeing what he did against Baltimore and Cleveland the past 2 weeks is what sealed the deal for me. Yeah. Seeing him play that well in those matchups was really impressive. And also, like, the past matchup, like you said, is amazing. I want to emphasize how good this matchup is with the Commanders. You referenced numberFire's net expected points. So on the season, the top quarterback in NEP per dropback is Brock Purdy at 0.38. The number 2 quarterback is quarterbacks who have faced the Commanders since the trade deadline at 0.32, and then Dak Prescott is at 0.25. So like the generic quarterback facing the Commanders since the bye has been more efficient than Dak Prescott and Josh Allen. And like, that's what you need to put up a huge number on a slate when you don't run. So I think that's why I'm really high on Stafford here, higher than I've been on a sub 7,000 quarterback this year, I think. Or sub $7,500 quarterback this year. And like, again, big part of the appeal is that we know who to stack him with. And to me, at least Puka Nacua, you can make the case for Cooper Kupp, and I think there is a case to be made. But like for me with Nacua, he's getting rushing attempts. He had a long one called back and a penalty 2 weeks ago against Cleveland. He's playing through all these injuries because he's just tough as nails. Overall target share in the games with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Nacua does rank second behind Kupp at 25%, but as a 31% deep target share in that span. And again, the rushing attempts do matter for me. So I think Puka might be one of the top 3 or 4 plays on the slate, regardless of position. How are you viewing the stack partners with Stafford?
Yeah, Puka has a lot going for him. Just great combinations of work with downfield, safer targets, carries, and he is laying out for catches. He's really locked in, and I think that someone like Stafford probably notices that kind of stuff too, and gets him a little extra. Again, the biggest fear for me is that they move the ball and then just hand off the touchdowns. That's really about it. So Nacua, I want him in my main lineup, I think, because I can stack him with Stafford. Are you going to play any other Rams other than Stafford and Nacua to a high degree?
Do you know actually is tied for the team lead in red zone targets this year?
Who is tied?
Yeah, do you know who?
I'm assuming Kyron.
Yeah. He missed 4 games. And he's still tied for the team lead in red zone targets, not red zone chances, red zone targets. Tied with Nacua and Kupp, who also missed time. But like, I think that means you could stack Kyron with Stafford because like there's the potential for a passing touchdown with Kyron. Salary is really high, but like his role it's similar to McCaffrey's, honestly. He's not, I don't think he's good as a player as McCaffrey, which is why we're not going to view him as well, but like his role is pretty similar. So you said play heavily. I don't think he meet that threshold. I don't think Kupp will either. I think that like, but I do want to get some Kyron in there. And with Kupp, I would say like, if you give me 10 Stafford lineups, I'm going Nacua in 8 and I'm going Kupp in 2. Like he had better production last week. He still looked really like not right at times. So that's why I'm low, but like he showed last week there's a path to him playing, like having a good game. So that's why I go 8 Nacua, 2 Kupp. You could pitch me on just going all Nacua, honestly, though.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we talked about it. And look, I love Kyron. I was targeting him coming back from the injury because his workload has been so good. I think he's a good player. So, and again, if you can just tie your running backs to an efficient offense, I will take that, especially whenever it is tied to such a good red zone workload.
Yeah.
I'm building some lineups as we're talking with McCaffrey, even with Stafford and a lot of the values. It gets a little tricky. Like it's very, very, very doable.
Yeah.
But you're basically saying, all right, McCaffrey's the guy, and I'm going to find upside with just the lower salaried plays, which I don't always love.
Well, I sent you one yesterday that had Nacua in it. It was Stafford, Kupp, or Stafford, Nacua, and McCaffrey.
You probably played Tucker Kraft then.
I did, but I like Tucker Kraft, so
I do too. I worry a little bit about what his pure upside is. I know he's coming off a 64-yard game, but that's one of those where I see the case. It's easy to make the case, but can you really give me like 15?
Yeah.
So,
let's talk about Antonio Gibson. Brian Robinson didn't practice on Wednesday with his hamstring injury, which to me implies he's probably not going to play. My concern with Gibson, I think he'll get a lot of targets, which is good. We want targets for our running backs. My concern is that they seem to kind of like Chris Rodriguez as like an early down potential guy. And as much as we love targets for running backs, I do want early down work too, because it boosts your touchdown odds. So I would probably use some Gibson if Robinson sits, but I think even if there's no Robinson, I'd still want to keep him around 20 to 30%, just because like I know the passive failure there are pretty obvious. How do you view Gibson if we assume Robinson does not play?
Yeah, so we love targets for running backs on this show, like you said, because they're on average historically worth about twice as much as a carry in terms of FanDuel points. Those half point really adds up when it's tied to like a 70% catch rate. I think that probably just need to think about it that way. But we don't like just receiving back, like we don't target third down backs because we love whenever someone has the featured rushing workload and then targets on top of that. That's usually really hard to find in the value range, which is why we aren't on value backs a lot. But no, I'm with you. I think that there's not necessarily enough I'm not convinced that Gibson's. I know he's coming off the 10 carries. I'm not convinced he's going to get 15 carries and the 5 targets. So look, if you want to stack this game, you're kind of just one player, like one value play away. I probably wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But then again, sometimes these are the situations where I'm just too low and I miss out on, I get a little too stubborn and assume that there's not going to be a role. But I really don't see, because I would love to play a value running back in this game
with pass catching in this game.
With
Hell
pass catching. Yeah. So I would love to be there, but I have to be a little bit skeptical because there's a difference between seeing it a little bit and then the opportunity being there. What we've seen this year is that they like Brian Robinson a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, they're not in the playoff hunt. They seem to like Rodriguez a bit. I know Ron Rivera's probably trying to save his job, but like shit might have sailed. So I would be okay with some, but I want to keep a pretty serious lid on exposure there. Let's talk about the pass catchers here for the Commanders. Other pass catchers, I guess I should say, given that Gibson does catch passes. We have 4 of them, which is frustrating, and I think means I don't need to bring back. How are you viewing all the Commanders options?
Another one of those situations where there's like a recipe for upside for all of these guys in different ways. For Terry McLaurin, it's what, 67?
Yeah.
It's leading the team in targets, being good at football, and converting on his opportunities. For Curtis Samuel, it's getting creative looks, carries, red zone touches. For Dotson, it's kind of just catching some bombs or doing some stuff with his opportunities. This is probably the exact kind of profile that I would just say no.
Yeah.
I think it's really easy to get one of these guys wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get them wrong, you're probably getting like a handful of FanDuel points, and that's not good.
Yeah.
We want ceiling. We don't think about floor. But the reality is if these guys don't have a huge game, they're not going to have a viable game.
Yeah. I think I'm probably highest in Samuel of the bunch just because I am a caricature of myself. I want, he hasn't had as many rush attempts this year, but like, I know. But like he has been getting a decent amount of work recently. If you look at the games that they played with all these guys healthy, so excluding games where he's gotten ejected or Logan Thomas left early, stuff like that, 20% target share for Samuel. McLaurin leads at 22%, but Samuel has a 28% red zone target share in that time. So like that's pretty enticing. I don't know. McLaurin, for whatever reason, just hasn't had any like yardage juice this year. And I don't know. And like Samuel has a better yards per route run and a better target per route run rate than McLaurin does this year. So I feel like I prefer Samuel. Like the best FanDuel point output from a Commanders receiver this year was from Jahan Dotson in week 8 when I believe Samuel was out. They have not had anybody else top 20 this year. Number 2 is Jamison Crowder. I forgot he was on their roster. I think he still is. I don't know. McLaurin's best is 18.6. Like,
Terry,
I think he recovered a fumble in the end zone for that one.
McLaurin's caught 48% of his downfield looks. It's a little subpar.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's 10 yards. Which hasn't really had the splash. I think it's 67. It's just a little too high.
Final question. Tutu Atwell, probably not going to play, it seems like. Demarcus Robinson is 56. He's been your guy more so than mine, but I think he had 6 deep targets last week. Let me fact check that because #facts matter. I'm in the wrong division. Okay, there we go.
Wait. Do you break your spreadsheets down by division? Oh my
god. Robinson last week, 8 deep targets. My bad. 8 deep targets on 10 total targets, and I think he had 4 in the red zone.
4 red zone, 3 end zone.
So, any Robinson for you?
If he had 168 air yards
on and now we're moving indoors
on a 98% route rate,
I feel like we kind of got to do it, right?
Against the league's worst pass defense,
right? Some for sure.
And just to clarify, I like Demarcus Robinson when he was running routes on the Chiefs at sort of their offensive peak. Not that I'm specifically a Demarcus Robinson guy.
He's also the fastest player on their team right now. If you look by their 40 times. If you take Tutu Atwell out, he's the only guy who's run better than a 4.6, and he ran a 4.59 coming out of college like 15 years ago. So I have no idea what his age is, to be fully honest with
you. Okay, so yeah.
I'll have a non-zero number of lineups with Demarcus Robinson. I'm going to use him in Dynasty this week too in some spots. So
he had 3 downfield targets the week before as well, plus an end zone target. Okay.
Yeah. Awesome.
Not a main lineup consideration.
Yeah.
Although, would you rather I don't know, DeMarcus?
It's gonna be someone I hate. I guarantee it.
No, like DeMarcus and Kelsey, or who would you get? Probably like an IU.
If it's anyone plus Kraft, I would go Tucker Kraft, the Tucker Kraft lineup. But
are you worried about Tucker Kraft, Jaden Reed overlap?
Nope. So let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. Moving to our trends discussion for week number 15. Well timed by you there. The Packers are facing the Bucs, and the Bucs suck against good passing offenses. And there were some issues with the Packers this past week. Monday Night Football didn't play super great, but honestly, I'm still into him this week. So your first trend's talking Packers. I'm going to talk Bucs in mine too, because this game is on the early slate, my favorite game. Like a 1 p.m. only lineup is probably going to have Jordan Love at quarterback for me. But let's run through what you're seeing here with the Packers when they've had plus matchups.
Okay, that's reassuring because I'm going to ask you about Jordan Love for the full slate as well.
He's quarterback 4 for me, I think.
Yeah, I think he's about that for me as well. I'll talk about why here right now. So the Buccaneers have become a funnel defense again. They're 29th against the pass according to numberFire's adjusted metrics, 5th against the rush, and that's just good news for Jordan Love, who's been not entirely matchup dependent, but somewhat matchup dependent this season. He's got 6 games against teams 20th or worse against the pass, and he's averaged 248 yards, 2 touchdowns per game, 7.8 yards per attempt. We're talking passing net expected points per dropback. He's at 0.24 there. If you set the baseline at 0, if everyone just plays to the opponent's expectation, he's at a plus 0.17 on a per play basis. So really, really good accounting for opponents there, and a 47% success rate. In 4 games specifically against teams 24th or worse, he's over 8 yards per attempt barely, 8.8 yard ADOT. And then if you flip the script and look at his matchups, 5 matchups against top 12 opponents, 6.34 yards per attempt. So you mentioned, you alluded to his struggles at certain points. I think he just might be matchup dependent. And we used to talk a lot about matchup dependent quarterbacks whenever we didn't have a lot of rushing quarterbacks who were just studs. We looked at matchups and just pocket passers in matchups. And I think Love kind of fits. His salary is $8,000. You could talk me into that. You could especially easily talk me into the QB4 for the week. But this team has a lot of injuries, which makes it a little bit tricky on Thursday to talk about who we love. Although, spoiler alert, Jaden Reed is our guy either way because he's good to go. But Aaron Jones was limited. We talked about that in practice on Wednesday. A.J. Dillon's got a thumb injury as well. If Aaron Jones returns at a salary of $6,200, I don't think we'll have his full workload, but A.J. Dillon seems like a cool guy, but I don't think he's given them a ton. So I think that they'd probably lean on Aaron Jones a good bit. Christian Watson got a hamstring. Dontavian Wicks ankle as well. Watson missed Monday's game. It's a little too early to tell here, of course, but if we look at 4 games without Watson, Jaden Reed leads the team with a 23% target share at 7.5 per game, just 44 yards per game, but getting some downfield work with 2.5 targets, at least 10 yards downfield, 2.3 red zone targets, so 23% total red zone opportunity share once you account for his rushes, which he does get. So Reed at 61, one of my favorite plays of the week. Pretty safely going to say he's in my main lineup as a core play. Romeo Dobbs still a good role, but Luke Musgrave's out, which opens up the door for Tucker Kraft. He played every snap last week, ran 81% of the routes, 4 targets for 64 yards. Again, I think we both like him a lot. I just want to be wary and not assume that he's got a huge ceiling. But if we're banking against like Kelsey, Taysom Hill, Kittle, just being sort of okay, Kraft makes a lot of sense. I believe in love, Jim, in this matchup. I love Reed already.
Very hallmarky of you. Yeah.
I love Love. You already mentioned that Love's your QB4.
Mm-hmm.
We love Jaden Reed. What else do you need injury-wise, health-wise, to want to play more Packers?
I would need a full practice for Aaron Jones by Friday because I don't know the last time he had a full practice. It's been years, I think, at this point. A.J. Dillon being banged up does help there, and also Vita Vea being banged up for the Buccaneers helps. But it's salary 62, so like that's enough to be make him somewhat intriguing. I don't think I'll get to Dobbs personally. That might be a mistake. But like, I don't know. I think I feel weird about him. Like for some reason, it doesn't give me like strong upside vibes, I guess. That I don't know. Vibes-based DFS is not the best. But like, just I don't know. How about you for Dobbs specifically?
I kind of glossed over him in the notes because I figured that would be your case, and that's sort of where I am.
Okay.
But he had 7 targets last week, which is an 18% target share. He's got a 20.3% target share in the games without Christian Watson. He scored 7 times. My model has him with 3 expected touchdowns, so that's kind of fluky. But he also hasn't scored in a while, and it's not like every player's season levels out to 0 by the end of the year. Some guys just overperform. At 64, I don't hate it by any means. I would, if I'm playing Jordan Love, it's probably like 8-2 with Reed versus Dobbs.
Yeah.
In terms of my stacks.
Yeah.
But I do think that Dobbs makes sense.
I think that's the right distribution. I like Reed a lot. So to me, Reed and Kraft are both like primary lineup considerations. Aaron Jones, not there yet, but could get there if we get in a full practice by Friday, especially if there's no A.J. Dillon, then that would help me with him quite a bit as well.
If there's no A.J. Dillon, but Aaron Jones is full, where are you with him?
Pretty high. Probably above Zeke at that point, honestly.
I think it'd be silly to sit here and say not. Right?
Yeah. Like he'd be a core play if that happens. I don't think that'll happen, to be clear.
Correct.
If it were to happen, I'd be very high on Aaron Jones for sure.
Do you think Christian Watson has a chance to play?
Do not.
I didn't think so either, but
he's weird though, because like it's the second time this year where he's looked like he like tore every ligament in every part of his body and has like been like, maybe I'll play next week. So I don't know. He played the next week in the first one, but let's talk about the other side of that game. The Buccaneers, they're also in a plus matchup. They've had 6 previous matchups this year against bottom half defenses. And in those games, Baker Mayfield is at 0.13 passing net expected points per dropback. He's at 0.05 in the other games. So it's been a lift, not a huge one, but at least a lift for Baker Mayfield. They've hit 20 points as a team in 4 out of 6 games. And 2 of their 3 highest point totals this year, 37 against the Texans, 27 against somebody else, and those came in those plus matchups. So they can have upside games, and they become a bit more likely when the matchup is softer. To me, though, that doesn't mean we need to use anybody other than Mike Evans or Rashad White. Baker's topped 20 FanDuel points or he hasn't topped any in any of those games. He hasn't hit 24 in any game at all this year. Chris Godwin has hit double-digit FanDuel points just 3 times this year. He has not hit 60 yards since October 22nd, and now he missed practice with a knee injury on Wednesday. And Cade Otton has had 1 relevant game in that Texans game. But White and Evans, I think, are both really nice. White has topped 18 FanDuel points in 3 of the 6 plus matchups. Packers ranked 21st against the rush, one of the better matchups White has had this year. He has 98 plus yards from scrimmage in 7 of the past 8 games. And his 2 biggest adjusted opportunity totals have come the past 2 games. So I think that White is a really nice play, even with his salary of $7,600. He's my favorite bring back for Reed and Kraft lineups, but I also actively do want to get to Mike Evans as well. All 3 of Evans' 20-point games this year have come in the plus matchups. He's averaging 17.9 FanDuel points per game in those games, up from 14.8 for the full season. His salary is $8,300, and I do want Nakua in that range, Deebo Samuel's in that range, but I'm going to actively make sure I get some Evans as well. So Evans and White are both prime considerations for me. How are you viewing those guys? And will you get to any of the other 3 ancillary jabronis, shout out Rich Rebar, on this team?
Who are the other 3?
Baker is an ancillary jabroni. Usually the quarterback doesn't count, but
yeah, that's why I was confused. No, I've mentioned Godwin a couple times just as someone who I think has like a path to some touchdown regression. Let me see where I have him.
He has a lot of red zone targets. His yardage stinks.
Yeah, and my model is basically reliant on things like yardage more than red zone opportunities because they all sort of go hand in hand. Aside from very specific issues, so he should have 4. He's got 2. On the flip side, Mike Evans is the most overperforming receiver in touchdowns on the main slate for me.
That'll happen when you bust off 78 yarders.
Yeah. So I like to be aware of that. It's not that he can't do it. It's not that he hasn't done it in the past. He's had really fluky touchdown numbers in his career. It's just I'm paying a premium for Mike Evans at his peak right now. I think someone like Puka Nakua, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk make more sense as a standalone play. But if I'm stacking this game, I will take Mike Evans. But the more core play for me is Rashad White. We've loved him all year. He's got an 80% snap rate, which if I unfilter here for the main slate, would it sort? If I click sort. So Kyron's at 82, Saquon 82, McCaffrey 81, and then Rashad White is the only other player above 71%. So like the results aren't always there, but as you mentioned, his matchups have been pretty brutal for the most part. I should probably prefer Rashad White to Zeke. He just makes it a lot harder to get to McCaffrey.
Right.
Would you rather play McCaffrey and Zeke or Kyron and Rashad White?
McCaffrey and Zeke. I do think there's a way to play McCaffrey and White. It does mean like that's a difference of $1,100. So I think back to that lineup I had McLaurin in there as a bring back with Stafford and Nakua. It would require me to jump down, maybe double stacking Stafford with DeMarcus Robinson. I'm receptive to that. So
yeah, and with Stafford, you're looking for passing touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So
right. So I'm receptive to it for sure.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just duplicate that lineup and then do the Robinson plus White pairing versus McLaurin with Zeke. Could also go from Pollard. I prefer Pollard over Zeke, but like I could do that too. So
yeah, but I think look, we're on the same page. There's about 4 running backs we feel really good with.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like Kyron's probably our RB5, but hard to get to.
Yes, actually, unless Aaron Jones, we get him as
and then
like
that was
a more legit option.
Do you like any other running backs in like the between Kamara and like we mentioned James Cook, we like him as game stacks, but like between Breece Hall at 75, we've got Breece, Rashad White, who we like, Saquon, Mostert, Henry, Devon Achane, Bijan, and Kamara.
I'm not using any of those guys, I don't think.
I don't think so either. It feels weird, but
I might put James Cook above Kyren potentially at salary.
That I could see.
Yeah, but yeah, I think we're on the same page there. Okay, let's go to your second trend and talk about Wacko for Flacco, because Joe Flacco has been an improvement. He hasn't been good. I'm not going to say that, but he's been an improvement of what they had before. So at least there's that. So you're going to dig into what they've done with Joe Flacco and what it means for the rest of that Browns offense.
Yeah, never, I like to say, if you told me in August, I'd be talking about, this player by week 6, I'd be like, what happened? But never thought I'd be talking about Joe Flacco at any point ever again. But he's played 2 games. He's averaged over 280 passing yards and 2.5 touchdowns on 44.5 attempts. So the volume is up. His ADOT's 9.8 yards, which is wild. NFL average just under 8. The rest of the Browns are at an 8.2 if you exclude Flacco. Now, as you mentioned, it's really kind of misleading. The EPA numbers are really bad. And so that's something to consider. This could come crumbling down. And not only are the EPA numbers bad, their success rates okay at best. So there's a lot of kind of either broken plays or a lot of over expectation performance here. Let me see if I can pull up quickly his, because I forgot to check this one. His completion percentage over expectation is actually minus 4.1%. So I don't know how this all goes hand in hand. It doesn't quite add up. But what we know is that the Browns are throwing it more. Their pass rate over expectation is plus 4.7 percentage points according to NFL Faster. Their pass rate over expectation leading into his starts were minus 6.4%. Roughly the same pace. So no huge change there. But this shift in passing volume has brought life to a couple pass catchers. We saw some big games or building blocks of really big games, at least, for the pass catchers with Elijah Moore in week 13, David Njoku in week 14. But if you look at the 2-game sample, Amari Cooper is the one who leads in target share. His salary is $7,200 this week, 22.6% target share for 9.5 targets per game, 4.5 downfield targets per game. Again, for me, 10 plus yards at least on those. His ADOT in this sample is 10.3 yards. He's averaging just under 100 air yards per game, just 55.5 yards per game, but caught 3 of 9 downfield targets. You love to see 9 downfield targets in 2 games. Want to see a few more catches there. They're not always going to be catchable from Flacco, but that opportunity is pretty solid. Elijah Moore, is his salary really 5,700, or did I write this down wrong? Seems low, but
I thought it was 62. It is 57. Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
So he's at a 21% target share. He's got 9 per game, 6.5 downfield per game. A lot of this came in week 13 when he had set the single season high in air yards for a receiver this season. He's averaging just under 165 air yards per game, 63 yards per game, though, minus 15% catch rate. It is what it is. But look, you could do worse process-wise than a sub 6,000 receiver who might just get a bunch of prayer yards. I don't think he's a core play, but at that salary, there's some appeal there.
Him
David
or Robinson?
Njoku, one should be efficient. One should be not. I'd probably go Robinson for offensive expectations, though.
I agree.
And then David Njoku will probably get some popularity at 62. The models have it seems like all of the projection systems have loved Njoku for a while.
Yeah.
His salary is 6,200. Maybe that's what you were thinking of for
Maybe,
more.
yeah.
But 17% target share coming off of a big game. The two touchdown game. I'll even shout out Cedric Tillman at 5 targets per game. I think he's 4,800, but he's got a 13.4 yard ADOT, 3 downfield targets per game. I wouldn't get there, but if I was building like some dollar lineups, and just kind of making stuff happen, trying to get like McCaffrey plus CeeDee Lamb or something just wild. You know, it is what it is. I'm not going to the running backs, I don't think, even if Ford is out. But look, this is a very different team now. I like Cooper. I think the salary might be a little high relative to other options. I wouldn't hate, though, if I had to settle for Amari Cooper.
Sure.
Because the volume seems there. Do you have interest in Cooper? Do you have interest in Moore? What about Njoku?
Interest in Cooper because he missed half that first game and still had 5 targets and then 14 targets when he was healthy. So like, and he's a better player than Elijah Moore. I feel pretty comfortable in saying that. So interest there again. It's just like, will I be in that salary range? That's the one hang up. So more so roster construction than player level. I'm receptive to Elijah Moore. I agree with you where I prefer DeMarcus Robinson, but like, it's not the worst idea to use a guy 57 on a team that's suddenly very pass heavy. I'm not going to get the backfield either because that matchup with the Bears is pretty tough on the ground. I prefer the other tight ends over Njoku. So it sounds like I'm pretty wishy-washy on them, but like I'm at least receptive to Amari and Elijah Moore, and I have not been for most of this year for those guys.
Yeah. So Cooper's target per route rate would be like 32.6%. I think that would put him second on the full season behind Tyreek Hill in that 2-game sample.
That's pretty good.
And Puka would be among relevant guys. Puka's at 29.8%. So
okay. Yeah, it's not bad.
I think he's more of a cash game head-to-head sort of play.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think that's very fair. Let's talk about Tyreek Hill because the Dolphins are in a tough matchup this week. My final trend, they've been kind of funky recently. They've put up some good point totals, but like they felt off. I don't know if that's just me, but like they felt a bit off. And now they're facing the Jets. So I wanted to see what the Dolphins have done in tough matchups this year, but it's kind of hard to do so because they haven't had a lot of tough matchups. They've had only one game this year against a top 10 defense by numberFire's metrics, and that was against the Jets the first time they saw them a couple weeks ago, that Black Friday game. If we expand the sample to top 16 defenses, it's a 6-game sample, so a lot of like middling defenses, not a lot of great defenses. They still average 25.7 points per game in that sample, but that's down from 32 in the other games. Tua Tagovailoa's passing NEP per dropback is 0.08. It is 0.39 in the easier matchups, so that's kind of tough there too. It has impacted his DFS output quite a bit. He's averaging 15.4 FanDuel points per game in these tougher matchups. If the wind remains high, it's currently 17 miles per hour. That's enough to cross off Tua. I had interest in him at 76 when I first opened the salaries in this slate, but digging in more, I'm pretty much off right now. Tyreek Hill still has 20 plus points in 3 separate games, but he's also been under 13 in the other 3. So a lot of his duds have come in tougher spots, and this is one of those. Jalen Waddle has been more neutral. He had 8 targets in the first matchup against the Jets. His salary, 7,000. I'm highest on him of this trio, but probably prefer Amari over him, honestly, in that 7,000 range. The backfield is tough because salaries are high. The 2 games with Devon Achane back, Raheem Mostert leads with 16 carries per game, but just 2 total targets. He has 75.5 yards to scrimmage. He's been like David Montgomery, but at a higher salary, kind of. Achane is 87 yards on 12 carries and 6.5 targets per game, but his salary is 85. So I want to be high on Achane in general, but that's too high of a salary for me to get there in this matchup. So I was high on this offense and the pieces within it earlier on this year. I just don't think this is the spot to go hard at them. So am I missing out on a chance to get the Dolphins at a lower roster rate than usual, all things considered?
Probably are missing out, but you're not getting any salary relief for the matchup, the conditions either. I will just shout out, look, like 8,500 for Achane, 8,000 for Mostert. Those are kind of salaries for more featured backs, and they split work to some degree. Achane coming off of a 9-target game, 2 downfield targets per in that last game, one of which should have been like an 80-yard touchdown catch. I don't know if you saw that one.
I had him in the 2-game slate, so yes, yeah, I did.
So got 48 air yards in that game. So he'd probably be the most likely player for me to get to, but Hill coming off of the injury conditions, tough matchup. I might say for the first time this year, really with Hill, if he burns me, he burns me. But I think the probability of that he just torches me gets lower and lower the more I look at it.
Like you could use McCaffrey indoors in the best matchup on paper, or you could use Hill outside in 17-mile-per-hour winds in one of the worst matchups. I'm going to go McCaffrey.
Yeah, I mean, a couple weeks ago we had the Tyreek or McCaffrey conversation. You leaned Tyreek a bit. I ended up playing McCaffrey in our head-to-head. You played Tyreek. I don't think it's really a conversation this week.
I agree with that. That was against the Commanders, by the way, which is why you should use Puka Nacua this week. Weather for this week beyond that Dolphins-Jets game. Again, that one's 17-mile-per-hour winds right now, which is tough. Other really tough one is Falcons-Panthers. So all of the pieces in there are going to be downgraded that we've talked about, tons of pieces. For this game, 16-mile-per-hour winds with rain likely. So Panthers defense at $3,300. Sign me up, baby. Texans, Titans, 10-mile-per-hour winds right now with rain potential there. For Browns, Bears, wind speed's 11 miles per hour. That's pretty in line with what those two teams typically play in, so it's not a massive deviation. There is also rain potential in Cleveland for that one. And then finally for Bills Cowboys, slight chance of rain, wind speeds 9 miles per hour. Nothing to worry about right now, just worth checking back on later. Let's dig in now to our positional plays for week number 15. Brandon, starting off at quarterback, who are you targeting this week?
Again, we got the same guys across the board. I think we can also talk about pivots. We also talked about some of these people in a lot of detail already, but we're really looking at Matthew Stafford, but I don't want to forget about prioritizing Josh Allen. The afternoon games this week, really intriguing across the board. Allen could be in the best game of the week pretty easily. Dallas is a tough adjusted pass defense, but in 4 games against top 8 adjusted pass defenses, Allen's still at 24 or 23.9 FanDuel points per game, 266 passing yards, 2.3 touchdowns, passing success rate of almost 50%. 0.23 passing net expected points per dropback over expectation. Again, you'd expect that to be 0 if they played to the level of opponent. That's a phenomenal number. Also 6.3 carries, 25 yards, and 0.5 touchdowns in this matchup. He's going to run the ball the rest of the season because they need to win. He's going to do whatever it takes. It's hard to sort of match up with that on the high end. But I think he's kind of the one guy with amazing upside. And there are other guys who could maybe get there, but if that's all we're looking at, I'm okay going down with Stafford as we talked about. I already mentioned like how good his splits are and the sort of rare opportunities that he gets against weaker pass defenses. But again, I think the thing that really stands out to me is he's had 5 games with Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, and Kyren Williams. He's averaging 250 yards and 2.6 touchdowns in those, and 2 of those were the most recent games, as you see here on the screen if you're watching along on YouTube. Against the top 2 pass defenses in football. He is now facing the worst pass defense in football. So what else could you want?
And it's also a slate where weather is in play. Yeah. It's not in play here as they're playing indoors. There is some wind at SoFi still, but it's not terrible by any means. And I feel like if you're going to spend down a quarterback, this is the spot to do so, more so than we've had pretty much this entire year.
Do you like Sam Howell?
No.
Okay.
Do you?
Like he'd be on the bottom of my consideration set, but I don't play that many quarterbacks.
Yeah, I will get there. I have the same 2 quarterbacks as you and Josh Allen and Matthew Stafford, and nothing really to add as far as those 2 guys go. Again, with the Commanders, 0.32 passing net expected points per dropback allowed since the trade deadline. Like you kind of got to go at that. Josh Allen, 5, 9, and 10 rush attempts with Joe Brady as OC. I think this is a good week to keep your core tight at quarterback. And to me, it's Allen and Stafford in the top tier, Dak in the second tier by himself, and then probably at Jordan Love as quarterback 5 for me, or quarterback 4. And I might not get to a 4th quarterback. So I think it's a very Brandon kind of slate in that regard, where you can keep your core tight and feel pretty good about it. So I think that's where I'm at, is probably just 3 quarterbacks. And if I get to a 4th, it'd be Jordan Love for me.
Sounds good to me.
All righty. Running back, what you cooking up there?
I'll let you talk about McCaffrey more, and I'll pivot to Kyren Williams.
Okay.
if you look at the 5 games that he shared with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, he's averaging 128.8 scrimmage yards. He's got an 86% red zone rushing share. The overall red zone share, if you count for all plays and his carries and targets, 49.1%. That's an elite number. He's at 66% of the routes. This is just one of the best workloads in football across the board, and this team should move the ball easily. I don't know what else you could want. I still prefer McCaffrey if I can get there, but Kyron's probably more of a like, what's the word? Compromise. What? I don't know. There's a word for it.
Settling? Like, I don't know.
It's like settling. Starts with a C. It'll come to me in a couple hours. I have
no idea what word you're trying to get to here.
I'll figure it out.
Okay.
We'll cut it out in post. No one's listening anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Second love. Do you want me to pivot again here?
No.
Okay. Second love is Tony Pollard. Game of the week. He's at least 70% of the snaps in 3 straight games. 83 scrimmage yards on 15 carries and 4.5 targets. Very viable. 33.7 red zone opportunity share as well. Kind of a moderate defense here in terms of running back matchups. And Pollard, the efficiency does check out pretty well, but I also just kind of like what I'm seeing from him from an on-field standpoint. And the third level, I'll just stick with Ezekiel Elliott. Patriots offense at least showed some life last week, which feels like a long time ago because they played Thursday. But look, you couldn't really pencil in a much more realistic workload for a running back in 2023.
Already home.
I was like that. I think that came to my head, but I was like, that doesn't sound right either. I think I wanted to say like consolidation, but boy,
I don't know. I couldn't read the word already. I tried to say Alfredi, and that doesn't make any sense. I think I thought Alfred for some reason, but already home, consolation. Thank you, already home. So we're not cutting it out in post. We're not going to retroactively like Men in Black wipe the brains of people watching on YouTube. Thank you, already home, for saving the show.
Don't make me look good in this. Make me look like an idiot who doesn't know words. But Zeke, 140 yards, 91% snap rate, 75% of the red zone opportunities. Chiefs are a good matchup here on the ground. I'm not going to overthink it, but I'm also not going to sit here and say Zeke is a 100% core play.
Yep, I agree with that too. My first love is Christian McCaffrey, as you alluded to. I can get here when using Stafford. Honestly, Brandon, remind me to send you a screenshot of a lineup I built with Kyron and McCaffrey. You're going to hate it. I know that. But like, you can do it with DeMarcus Robinson.
Jaden Reed, I knew he's going to be in it.
And Tucker Kraft. Yeah, but just listed out the whole lineup. But yeah, you can do it. He is at 139.1 yards in scrimmage per game in the games with the big 4 being fully healthy. That is McCaffrey with a 51% red zone share. He's had no touchdowns in 2 of the past 5 games. So we kind of forgotten how big his upside can get. The 49ers defense is banged up, so this game may stay more competitive later on. I think that's a positive for sure. My second level will also be Tony Pollard. Pollard, his passing game usage is getting better than what it had been coming out of their bye week. He's had 4+ targets in 4 straight games, which has allowed him to get a lot of adjusted opportunities or carries plus 2x targets. He's had 22, 25, 28, and 32 the past 4 games. Despite that, his salary is back down to $7,000. I love getting pass catching backs in games with high totals and tight spreads. So he gets me lower salary exposure to it. So I do like Pollard. You talked about Zeke, and I do like him. So let's talk about Rachaad White here briefly. It's another game that we feel pretty good about stacking. The Packers are pretty soft against the run, and we saw that with Tommy DeVito shredding them back on Monday. But I mean, we saw Saquon Barkley do pretty well in that matchup as well. White has been really good, honestly, throughout this year, especially relative to expectations. And the salary's gone up, but like, it's a pretty fun game. I took the over this morning with the wind speed going down 1 mile per hour. That made all the difference in the world to me. So I think he pairs well with Jaden Reed or Tucker Kraft as a bring back option. So I do like Rachaad White. Prefer Zeke, I think, at salary, but I do think that White is pretty fun, and he's right there. It's not a huge gap between those two guys, even considering its salary.
Yeah, I just think like it's 130. I could have played Rachaad White, who's been good all year. finally getting a good matchup where I played the guy on the team that might score 3 points. So
yes, that would be above expectations for them at times. Receiver, what you got there?
I'll just stick with the same plays, and then we can kind of rattle off some pivots if we want. But the reason I like Puka Nacua is everything. Just checks every single box with his workload. In those 5 games with Kupp and Kyron Williams, 26% target share for 8.2 per game, yardage of just 63 yards per game, but great ADOT of almost 11 yards, 4 downfield targets per game. Washington is 32nd in yards per route run allowed to receivers, 30th in ADOT allowed, so average depth of target, and 28th in catch rate over expectation. Couldn't really slot in a better situation for Puka Nacua this week. Second love is Rashee Rice. I think Rice and my next guy, Jaden Reed, we like McCaffrey a ton. We like Stafford, but Rice and Reed might be the first guys I just plug in.
Sure.
So that's how high I am on these two. The breakout for Rice is continuing 10, 9, and 10 targets in his past 3 games. So in-game target shares of 31.3%, 30%, and 25.6% to help sort of give some context. It hasn't just been elevated passing. His workload's been really good relative to the rest of the team. 81 yards on those 9.7 targets per game. Really low ADOT, but he's still getting some downfield work, 2 downfield targets per game, 2 red zone targets per game for a 40% red zone target share. Seems like his workload is just outpacing that salary, which I like. Then Jaden Reed, we talked about a lot, gets carries, has led this team in target share without Christian Watson, but love the carries. 1.3 per game in his recent games. Never bad for a receiver to get high leverage carries, and he is good at football. And the Buccaneers, again, funnel defense, so I'm not necessarily looking for the best rushing game from Jaden Reed, but I think elevated passing is going to go toward him anyway.
You mentioned the value of rushing attempts. I think that actually does apply to Puka Nacua as well. And Nacua is my top love at wide receiver, checking in at $8,000. And I just don't think we can pass him up in this matchup. Again, a 25% target share in the games he's played with Cooper Kupp and Kyron Williams, with 31% of the deep targets. But also, he has 4 rushing attempts across the past 4 games. He had a really nice run that got called back on a penalty as well. So the rushing yardage from him could be even a bit better than what it looks like right now. And I think to me, what the rushing attempts signal is they want the ball in this guy's hands, regardless of how it gets there. So that's good for Jaden Reed. It's good for some other guys, but especially for Puka Nacua as well. And I think that the salary of $8,000 is too low. And it's a guy who has this good of a median expectation and also a very obvious path to a ceiling, playing indoors against the league's worst pass defense. I think that's too many boxes being checked to ignore. So Puka Nacua to me is one of the top priorities, any position across all of week 15. My second love is also Rashee Rice. I just agree with you, what you're saying here, where his role is better than the salary implies. The route rate finally went up this past week, but even before then, he had 10 and 9 targets in the previous 2 games, and he had 10 last week. And that's when they said, hey, we want to get the ball to our good playmakers. Rashee Rice is that. He's had good yardage totals in those games too. So the Patriots rank first against the rush, but are 25th against the pass. So volume here should be good. So I like Rashee Rice a lot. My third love is also Jaden Reed. I typically don't like low ADOT guys because I want that yardage upside. But again, they want the ball in his hands. That matters a lot to me. He had 10 targets in their first game with no Christian Watson back out, and he had 4 rush attempts on Monday alone, 2 of which came inside the red zone. He's Curtis Samuel. It's back. Being used like 2020 Curtis Samuel is an underrated role for DFS, both in terms of median expectation, but also upside. So I like Reed a lot. I would also say Demarcus Robinson, 56, if you need to save salary. Maybe Elijah Moore, 57. And then also Gabe Davis, 62 in game stacks of Cowboys Bills. All guys, I am okay. Any other receivers you want to shout out here?
Again, Debo and Ayuk, I think, are great pivots. And Amari, I'm kind of warming up to Amari at 72.
Yeah. Don't mind Mike Evans. Okay, tight end. What you got there?
I got Jake Ferguson, 59. He's got single game target shares of 20 and 20.5% in his past 2. The role is scaling back up from where it was earlier in the season. Bills kind of funneling some extra targets toward tight ends, or 23rd in target per route rate allowed to tight ends, or subpar, like barely in the literal sense, like just subpar in yards per route rate allowed to tight ends. So it's a fine matchup, and it's a way to get exposure to this game if you're bringing it back with from a Josh Allen stack, or if you're trying to play Dak, playing a quarterback and plugging in his tight end, never a bad idea. Second love is Tucker Kraft, the sort of punt play of the week at 4,700, but I think there's a little bit more to it than just sort of punting. He's got 3 games without Luke Musgrave, 97% snap rate, 76% route rate, 4 targets per game. It's under a 12% target share, but solid red zone roll, 19% target share. Tampa Bay, 26th in target per route rate allowed to tight ends, 22nd in yards per route, and 24th in ADOT. So I think it's probably hard to find a better sub $5,000 tight end this week.
I agree. We don't always get to a sub 5,000 tight end. We do have it here with Kraft. For the reasons you mentioned, he is my second love as well. Only 12 targets in the 3 games with no Musgrave, but lots of snaps. Targets have been pretty efficient, and they should be efficient in this matchup too against the Bucs. So I will take all the salary I can save on a slate where I like Josh Allen, Christian McCaffrey, Puka Nacua, Mike Evans, Debo, et cetera, et cetera. I'm okay saving some salary tight end. I also have Jake Ferguson as my top guy because he's just good access to a great game for $5,900. And he has a 17% target share since their bye when they've been throwing a ton. So 17% matters even more in this offense with a 24% red zone target share. And the reason I've come around on him, you were right in that you were higher on him earlier on. I have come around, though, because the yardage upside is there. 70-plus yards in 3 out of 7 games since their bye week. So fully in on Jake Ferguson. Like him a lot here. Defense. Oh, you got a question?
Any other tight ends?
Kincaid, when I'm stacking Bills, Cowboys. Probably just primarily him, I guess.
Okay. So low on Kittle, low on Kelsey this week by comparison.
Because I want to get to McCaffrey, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Defense.
Panthers, they're the kind of one standout here at 33 against the Falcons. Even they're last in pressure rate according to Next Gen Stats. Desmond Ridder still takes sacks against low pressure teams. He's 2.2 per game with a 7.5% sack rate. Really bad EPA numbers, even when you adjust for these low pressure teams. I don't think you do a whole lot better than Carolina at home at 33.
I agree. They're my top one as well. Like for a cash game, I think you just put them in and figure out the rest later. So love the Panthers at 33. I would say that, or 34?
33.
33. I think there is appeal in the Rams, given how often the Commanders drop back. Their salary is pretty high at 43, but it's also not super restrictive. And they're not a great defense, but I like that idea. If I'm stacking like Bills Cowboys, or if I'm stacking Packers Bucks, something like that, I don't mind getting to the Rams at 43 because I don't think they'll catch a lot of attention for this week. So fine with going to them as well as a potential other option. Any final thoughts for you on the Week 15 main slate before we close up shop for today?
I think we really covered this one. A lot of ways to go at the top games, the top 3. Maybe some, look, I think the thing that stands out to me is that the 2 areas we really overlooked were like the 75 to 9,000 range at running back and like the stud tight ends, and just overlooked in the sense that it sounds like we're low on that range. So there's still ways to get different, even though like me and Jim overlapped exactly with our picks. There's still ways to get different without being goofy. And that's always something that you can take advantage of if you not that what we say is representative of everything, but there are still going to be ways to get a little bit different, even though there are a couple obvious spots this week.
Is this the most aligned we've ever been on a slate in 9 NFL seasons of doing a podcast together?
Well, we started doing the same. We used to like not talk about the same loves.
But like, would we have like had this much alignment overall previously, even if we had allowed that?
Probably once or twice. I feel like there were, but exact overlap, I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's pretty good. I feel good about that. Could be a bad sign, but I think it's a good omen. Yeah. I trust your process. No, I would never admit that publicly, but I trust your process. So we're overlapping. I'll feel good about that. That is all that we have here for today on the Week 15 preview podcast. We are once again back with you on Monday to wrap it all up. That'll be live on the FanDuel YouTube page at 10 a.m. Eastern. That's actually the last recap show of the year, I just realized. So come swing by 10 a.m. Eastern, talk about week 15 and recap things there. Also check out the Daily ISO with Tom Vecchio for your Thursday night NBA DFS needs, all right here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed and over on FanDuel TV Plus. Brandon, people have questions for you on Twitter. Where can they find you there?
I'm on Twitter at Gdula13, GDULA13.
And I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can find me on Threads at Jim.Sonis. You can find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your lineups across week number 15. We'll talk to you once again Monday to wrap it all up. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.